Hi students. Okay, welcome back. I hope everyone had a great Memorial Day weekend. We're going to move on to what I think is one of the most important skills from Unit 7. We are skipping around a little bit, so go ahead and jump forward to 7-6, which starts on page 245. This is a big lesson. However, when I went on IXL for all 3 classes, I noticed that the majority of you had mastered comparing fractions using models. So we're actually going to forward past that. If you haven't done P15, so P as in Peter 15, you can work on that on the side just to make sure that you are great about, or that you understand that skill. It was 80% or higher from each of the classes had already mastered it. So I decided to go forward. We are going to jump right to the math portion of comparing fractions. This is a skill I'll probably spend a couple days on. It is extremely hard. I think, however, once you get going, you will understand it quite well. If you do not know your facts, I highly suggest that you pause the video and go get your multiplication chart and use that as a tool. Okay, so we're going to use these workbook pages, but we're not going to use them quite how they're intended to be used. We're going to use them more for just using the practice problems. So at the top of page 245, it does say we're going to compare using fraction steps and number lines. We're going to pass forward past that, and we're going to jump to doing the math. So if you want, you can zoom down to, or I guess I'll zoom in, but you can jump down to number 3. So you're going to see 2 kinds of problems, okay? But for each of these problems, when we're comparing, the goal is to find what we call a common denominator. Now, we already learned, I'm just going to abbreviate here. We already learned back in the beginning of the unit that when fractions have a common denominator, we can simply look at the numerator and decide which fraction is bigger. We're going to eventually get there. That would be step 2, but step 1 now is going to be to make them have a common denominator. And common just means the same. So that's ultimately your goal. Now you're going to have 2 kinds of problems. You're going to have an easier problem and then a little bit of a harder problem. The easier problem is where you're only going to have to change 1 fraction, and the harder problem is where you're going to have to change both. But again, by the time that we're done over the next couple days, I'm hoping that the skill will actually be no problem for most of you. So we're going to look at the first one where we would compare 3/4 and 7/12. Neither of them have the same numerator or the same denominator. So this is when we have to find that common denominator, find one that's the same. Now this is going to be one that has an easy step, because here's the first thing you do. You look at the smaller denominator and ask yourself, can I change it to what the bigger denominator is? And you sure can, because 4 can be multiplied to get to 12. So I'm going to cover up my 3 here by making an equal sign, and I'm going to change it to 12. And remember from lesson 7-4, how we change it is by either multiplying or dividing. Oops. And in this case, I'm going to multiply by 3. And so I'm going to do the same to the top, and I'm going to learn that 3/4 is equal to 9/12. Once I do that, now I can compare, because look, they have a common denominator, and whenever the denominator is the same, we just look at the numerator. 9/12 is larger, therefore 3/4 is larger. Okay? Now, I'm going to skip down and do number 7, and I'm going to explain why. Number 7 is another one of those easy ones. You're going to want to look for those easy ones so you don't do more work than you have to. Okay, I know right now some of you are like, ooh, I cannot do more work than I have to. Absolutely. For these, you're always going to start by saying, can I make the lower denominator into the bigger denominator? Because if I can, then I don't have to change both of them. And here's another example of where you can. Because 5 or 5ths can be turned into 10ths by multiplying by 2. So now if I do the same to the top, I get 2/10. And now it's easy to compare, because 4/10 is greater than 2/10. Remember, the last lesson taught us that if the denominators are the same, we just compare the numerators. Okay? Now, unfortunately, on this section, these are the only 2 that are, oh, I'm sorry. Number 5 is also like that. Okay, and you'll learn eventually. You'll be able to look at them and tell. Okay, but for this one, same thing. I always ask myself, can I turn the smaller one into the larger one? And I can, because 5ths can be turned into 10ths. I do that by multiplying by 2, so do the same to the top, and 3/5 is equal to 6/10. So now I can compare, and this is an example where they're actually equal to each other. Because 3/5 is the same thing as 6/10, 3/5 is equal to 6/10. Okay? Now, don't worry, again, this is just day one. We're going to be doing this skill over the next couple days, but this is an example of where you can't change it. 5ths can't be turned into 6. There's nothing, a whole number you can't multiply by 5 to get to 6. So this is an example where you're going to have to change both of them. Now, there's a couple ways you can do this, but I'm going to give you the easiest way. The easiest way to find a common denominator is just multiply the denominators that you have. So what is 5 times 6? It's 30. You're going to change both of these fractions to 30ths, because once you do, then you can compare them. Now, take it one fraction at a time. So to get from 6 to 30, I multiply by 5. Do the same to the top, and I get 15/30ths. Now go do this fraction. To get from 5 to 30ths, I multiply by 6. Do the same to the top, and I get 12/30ths. Now that I see I have 12/30ths and 15/30ths, I know that this is bigger. Now don't forget, you are comparing these original fractions, so 2/5 is less than 3/6. You're just using common denominator fractions to help you find that out. Okay? Let's jump over and do number 4. So this is another example of a two-stepper, because there's no whole number I can multiply by 5 to get to 12. Okay, you always want to see if you can make it into the bigger denominator, but if you can't, then you're going to have to change both. So the easiest thing to do is to multiply 5 times 12. And again, if you don't have your chart, then make want to get it out. 5 times 12 is 60s. 60. Okay, and again, there's other ways to do it. So if a parent wants to teach you a little bit of an easier way, I'm okay with that. But for me, with time's sake, that's the easiest way to find a quick common denominator. So to go from 5 to 60, you would multiply by 12. So do the same to that 3, the numerator, and you would get 36. So 36/60ths. And then for here, it would be 12 times 5 to get to 60. And so do the same to the top, and you would get 35/60ths. Look how close they are, but he is still larger, even if it's just by 1/60th. Okay? Now, same thing here. I always ask myself, can the 8 be turned into 10 by multiplying by a whole number? It can't. So this is when we do the common denominator. Quickest way to find a common denominator is to multiply them. 10 by 8 is 80. Again, I'll say one more time, if a parent wants to teach you another way, I'm totally okay with that. So I'll do this side first. 8 times 10 is 80, so do the same to the numerator. That's 30/80ths. 10 times 8 is 80, so do the same to the top, and that's 16/80ths. So 2/10 is definitely smaller. Now, for the remainder of this video, I'm just going to continue to do practice problems in the workbook. I would love for you to stay with me. Once you feel like you've kind of mastered it, then you can move on to the homework. Maybe check with a parent first before you do that. But just so you know, the homework score today is the final score. So you will have no chance for corrections, because it's kind of it's more than a 50-50, because they could be equal, but I just don't want people guessing. So whatever score you get, that's the score you get. Okay, let's do some more on page 246. Okay, so again, I'm going to go through these in order because we never know which one they're going to be. So I'll start with number 9. I can't turn 3 into 5 by multiplying by a whole number, so I'm going to have to change both. 5 times 3 is going to get me my common denominator of 15. And now I'm going to convert both of them. So 3 times 5 is 15, so do the same to the top, and that's 10/15ths. And 5 times 3 gets me 15, so do the same to the numerator, and I get 9/15ths. So they are close, but 2/3 is still larger. Okay, now number 10, I asked myself, can I turn 6 into 12s? And I can. So this is one where you only have to change the 6, because he's already in 12s. So if you make him 12s, then you're done after that because he's already in 12, so you can compare. So I do 6 times 2 to get to 12s. I do the same to the numerator and I get 10 12s. And that's when I realize that 10 12s is equal to 5 6. Okay. Okay, number 11. Can I turn 4 into tenths? I cannot. So fast way to find a common denominator, and maybe you can like try to figure out the common denominator before I say it, would be 40ths, because 10 times 4 is 40. So 10 times 4 is 40th. 10 times 4 is 40, so do the same to the top. 8 times 4 is 32. And then on this side, 4 times 10 is 40, so 3 times 10 is 30. So just by a little bit, 3/4 is smaller or less than 8/10. Okay, now for some of these, the numbers are gonna start to get bigger. That is gonna lead us into the second half of this unit. Don't be scared when you start seeing hundredths. That's gonna be a common, or a, I don't wanna say common, a denominator that you're gonna work with a lot. Okay, so 5 can be turned into hundredths, so you're gonna leave hundredths alone. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, and now you're gonna have to think about how many times you would multiply 5 to get to 100, okay? And if you don't know this, we want this to become something that's part of your memory, and it's 20. Because don't forget, you would have 10 10s to get to 100. 5 is half of that, so you would need 20 of them. So now do the same to the top, 20 times 4, and I would just count by 20s, 20, 40, 60, 80, so it's 80 hundredths. So 4/5 is just a little bit greater than 75 hundredths, okay? And they're gonna throw some of those at you, because again, we'll be working with tenths and hundredths later in the unit. Okay, I'm gonna do 2 more. Don't forget, this is only day 1. We're gonna spend a few more days on this skill. You could always rewatch the video if you feel confused. You can also request to meet me on Google Meet if you still need some extra help. Okay, so always ask, can 5 be turned into eighths? It cannot. Quick common denominator is 5 times 8, which is 40. Notice that I'm setting it up, okay? Organization definitely helps with this. So 5 times 8 is 40, so do the same to the top, and that gets me 24 40ths. 8 times 5 gets me 40, so 5 times 5 gets me 25 40ths. Just a little bit larger, okay? And then the last one, can I turn 3 into tenths? I cannot. So find a quick common denominator. 10 times 3 is 30. So 10 times 3 is 30. Do the same to the numerator. That's 21 30ths. And then 3 times 10 is 30. So 2 times 10 is 20 30ths. So 2/3 is just a little bit smaller. Okay. So again, if you're feeling confused, I don't want the video to go on too much longer. If noticed that if it's too long, students don't watch this. We're gonna do the same skill tomorrow, and in fact, my video is just gonna be more practice problems. But don't forget that today on the homework, whatever score you get, that's the score you get. And try to put your work in a notebook. Okay, we're not doing a homework page from the packet, you're doing a different homework page. Try to put it in a notebook, and that way if you do need me to help you on Google Meet, we can go over the work you did and find out what went wrong. Okay, good luck, you guys.